Well, we just talked through what we would expect in some of the stages, those 4 stages of cultural adjustment, adjusting to a new cultural setting. Now we want to continue that discussion and think about some of the practical ways that we adjust and that we should adjust as we prepare to enter into a context, the ways, practical ideas that will make the adjustment a lot easier. And then we have some resources too that would help in our approach to make the challenge of the adjustment more manageable, is give us some different points of view for how to engage with it. There are a lot of views for what the best way is to adjust to a culture, but most agree that certainly learning about the cultural setting, familiarity with it is crucial, is critical, that we eventually understand and adjust as we get to know the context, get to know local people in the context. Now, because of the particular goals that we have to be in the context, even in the first place, the reasons why we're there, our initial years will be spent in what we call cultural and language acquisition, those activities that help us to work our way through a systematic program that we're going to introduce for you of learning to communicate well, understanding the culture, getting to know the people around you, and we feel like that is really the best way for us to be adjusting to the new culture and to the new country. And so in the tutorials that are following this particular one, we'll go ahead and look in detail at some of the specifics of that process of learning a language and culture, language and cultural acquisition. But prior to that, in this introduction, we're going to discuss some ideas about adjusting and learning to adjust, preparing to adjust to a new location. That preparation to adjust for us begins and should begin even prior to our relocating. It's important for us as individuals and families and those who are going to go into a setting to learn as much as we can about a host culture, that we actually should engage in personal research that looks at the people there, the culture there, the social norms, the religion, the language, the food, the entertainment that we would expect, the kind of accommodation we would encounter. Anything we can really find out about that country and people, it helps us to prepare well. And that good preparation can go a long way in helping us to be received well in a setting. Now, as a goal or a set of goals for our personal research, we could list some areas for us to get familiar with, become familiar with. One would be an introduction to the country and its history, its politics, and its culture, to start to establish some reference points for ourselves there. And then also to read about the cultural values, understand the cultural values, the customs and the etiquette, and the ways that those things impact work life and social life as well. And then also to understand what the realities and lifestyle change are that will face us as we move to a new destination like that, a new region. And also another area that we want to begin to build a bridge, a connection to the other team members that we may have as we go to work in a new area. And then finally, and importantly as well, we want to be introduced to the languages and the cultures, the languages and cultures in that region in general, and some of the specific characteristics of those languages and cultures. So those are prior to location kinds of adjustments that we're beginning to make that as we consider moving to a new location. Now there are helpful attitudes for us as we adjust to a new cultural setting. We've alluded to some of those already. That cultural adjustment is something that everyone is going to experience. There will be times of stress for just about all of us. There will be times of fatigue. There will be certainly times when we feel like we're not in control of our environment. And no matter how well we prepare for the destination, how much prior research we do, that there will be times when we just want to be in a familiar place, where we want to understand what's going on better than we do, where we could function more freely and communicate well. And that challenge of cultural adjustment could be said to be one of the major reasons why there are still unreached peoples in the world That's where the rubber really meets the road for the church in its efforts to fulfill the Great Commission, that challenge of crossing into those second language and cultural settings. The big decision for us really as cross-cultural workers isn't necessarily to just go, but the daily decisions that those cross-cultural workers make to adjust such that they can sustain themselves, so that they can stay. And we see in the attitude of the Lord Jesus Christ as He describes discipleship for us that God understands and He appreciates sacrifices made by His people as they put themselves in difficult situations. And as we get out of our comfort zones, that God honors that He recognizes the purpose that He has for us in those settings, and we're committing ourselves to His purposes for His sake as we engage in the lives of others. And so, all that to say that one of the most helpful attitudes that we can have when we face cultural fatigue or stress as we adjust cross-culturally is to remember what the Lord Jesus did do for us in coming to earth and living out an example as a disciple. And then there are some others, though. There are some other helpful attitudes that help us to bridge into second cultural situations, second language situations. One of those is that we realize that everyone experiences some degree of cultural fatigue. So we could very easily, usually, find someone else who's gone through that cultural adjustment, and particularly those who we see have come out on the other side with a positive attitude. And we want to model ourselves after those who have adjusted well and get a perspective from them. Many times we feel most inclined to identify ourselves with people who are in a permanent state of complaining or this cultural shock that seems to envelop them and hold them in a place of lack of adjustment. And frankly, even though expats tend to congregate in those kinds of groups, it's best to avoid people who haven't adjusted well and find those who are positively adjusting and have succeeded in the challenge of that. And also, an attitude important to us is to really be willing to admit we don't know. There's a lot we don't know. We don't know everything. We don't know nearly everything. There are lots of issues or scenarios. There are lots of incidents, events, attitudes in a situation that don't make sense to us. Our assumptions about those probably are wrong, may be wrong, and it's okay. We don't know. It's a part of that process of becoming culturally aware, to be humbled as a learner in that way. And so we assume first that we might be misunderstanding, suspend judgment in that sense, that we're in a situation, but we want to learn from it. That there are different ways of doing things, and that aren't necessarily better or worse, but just they're different. And as we are acknowledging that we don't know everything, we do have to suspend judgment. That's a part of it, or an aspect of that attitude. We need to be willing to really collect good information as much as we can before we try to describe or characterize or even evaluate well a situation. That we look for the logic in place in that setting, the logic that would lead people to the conclusions that they're arriving at that would be for us maybe strange or confusing or difficult or threatening. And we can assume that other people, knowledgeable local individuals, are good resources. They're the ones that know, and they can help us to learn. That they have found good and different solutions to similar problems that we would face, and that's okay, that the solutions are different. And we use them, rely on them as a resource as we suspend judgment. And then also, and again, some of these attitudes, it's easier to describe them than to really to implement them in a setting, but the Lord gives grace to us as we also can learn to empathize well with other people, that we really are desiring to stand in the place where they stand, in their shoes, and learn how they would like to be treated by someone like us from the outside, trying to think about their point of view in that situation, how they're experiencing us as foreigners coming into that setting, and how we can treat them with empathy and respect. And then very consciously often too, as another attitude, important attitude, we really do have to systematically and regularly check our assumptions, the assumptions that we will be bringing to bear constantly, and then get feedback from others around us, local friends, neighbors, to check, to gauge our assumptions. Am I understanding this right? Is this the way you're really thinking about this? Many times we'll find that we're making wrong assumptions about how people are thinking and why they're doing the things that they're doing. And then another attitude, and again, it sounds like a long list of attitudes, but certainly reference points to remember and think about as you engage with a new situation, that there's ambiguity that we just have to become comfortable with. That many times in cross-cultural situations, there's a level of complexity in life that we're not aware of. And there's an uncertainty in areas that aren't uncertain for us from in the place where we come from. And so we try to bring our kind of control and work everything out in the way according to the assumptions that we would have, and it doesn't work well. So we need to learn to recognize that there's ambiguity in that. And as we suspend judgment and we deal with the ambiguity, we allow the Lord to truly be the one who's in control. He's guiding and leading us in each of those situations. And He'll help us to apply an appropriate level of judgment in time that reflects His goodness and His purposes. And, in the process of seeing ambiguity in a situation and accepting that as a part of life, we can also celebrate then diversity. That there are ways that we can share and appreciate the culture that's the new culture around us, the local friends and coworkers that we have, that we can see the diversity in cultural expectations and norms and be okay with that. And in fact, we can intentionally and should intentionally find good ways to talk about the differences or the similarities and be positive and appreciative in the way that we approach those conversations, that we look for the positive comparison or similarity rather than just finding the negative or critique in all of those situations. That we can in a sense in that word picture of relaxing our hold on our own culture, we can let go a little bit and enjoy the place where we are, because we want to ultimately, as another attitude, enjoy the situation that we're in. We want to learn to enjoy that. We could even, for example, as a good exercise, make a list of the positives that we could identify in the present situation that we're facing, that cultural situation. And really take the time to list out what we enjoy, what we appreciate in the culture around us. What could be seen as positive? What is it that we are looking forward to there? And what can we try for ourselves that would be enjoyable, for example, as an appropriate and helpful, healthy attitude? And then, as is the case in a lot of life, that we can't take ourselves too seriously. We have to maintain a healthy sense of humor about life. There are lots of awkward and funny situations that happen. We could give lots of examples about that as we adjust to a new language and culture. And we've got to learn to laugh at ourselves. And we make mistakes. We can even talk about those mistakes with others. We can model the lack of stress over mistakes that are made. And in the process of that too, we can have faith. We can have faith that the Lord is our identity, and therefore that He's working with us and through us in those adjustments, and that He'll use the humility of those adjustments to guide us and to present, in a sense, a model of Himself through our lives, that we can begin to think about in that way the needs of others around us as a positive attitude of servanthood, and be concerned about the others there. That then we are less concerned, and that's a Christian and appropriate attitude, right? Of being concerned more about the others around us than about ourselves and how we feel, or how intimidated we are, or how uncomfortable we are, or how foolish we may look. So those are some of those early helpful attitudes that really persist and create for an appropriate kind of adjustment for those who are successful in cultural adjustment. And in addition to the attitudes that we could describe like that briefly, there are some specific activities that we can talk about as we describe the adjustment of learning a new cultural setting, learning a new language and culture. Now, one of the recognition points for us in learning a new language and culture is as we said before, that this is a long and ongoing process, that probably we should prepare for that to be a several-year process. And it's good to remember that you're being helped through the process, through an extended process of learning to be comfortable. And the more you learn, the more comfortable you can become over time. And so one of the practical activities that we can engage in is just exploration. That we can go out as is appropriate for our situation, get a sense for the environment around us, look for parks, for sports facilities, for bus stops, for any of the common ways in which people interact regularly in life, and get a sense for the way people greet each other, how they socialize, where they meet, where they congregate. That we explore intentionally, and again, stepping out immediately, often out of our comfort zone. It'd be much more comfortable for us to huddle down, but for us to intentionally step out of our comfort zone, explore those local places that are familiar for those around us. And in the process of exploration, too, one of the helpful activities for us is to make use of the local media sources. There's lots of opportunities to read and engage in countries where we go: books, poetry, newspaper, magazine, radio, television, movies and theater, songs and music, many forms of expression that are public and media-like. And granted, in some of those circumstances, we'll have difficulty initially engaging with the language change, but sometimes there are bilingual forms of access, and then over time we'll be learning to speak and read the language, and that'll be a regular part of our intake in an activity that will be a benefit to us as we adjust. So thinking about the media opportunities or points of engagement for us, the multiple kinds of media that are available. Now, in activity terms, there's just a reality of the fact that almost in every case we have to adjust our schedule. That the rhythm of life in that setting is not the same as what we expect. And that's a challenge for a lot of us. That the time of meals could be different, and we need to adjust. The kind of access to how to even cook meals is going to be different. And the ways that work is accomplished throughout the course of a week or a day, it changes. And so there's a routine, and with a family even more so, a challenge to the adjustment to a routine, but as a helpful activity and exercise for us to find together a routine that's appropriate for the setting where we are. Now, again, what we've described as cultural shock can tend to bombard us in certain seasons and can immobilize or paralyze certain of us. And so we want to initiate activity. We want to keep ourselves busy. We want to keep active, keep our minds functioning, not sitting around and feeling sorry for ourselves. And all of us are prone to it at times, feeling sorry for ourselves, turning inwardly and failing to engage with opportunities around us that we're describing in this list of activities. That we rather than being paralyzed, we just join in. We begin to find the things, again, that we've described that people do locally, and we take part in those things. We find a way to actively participate, even when we feel foolish at first, and we will. But the people are very forgiving by and large, and as we engage in the life and community, automatically going about living and working and making that conscious effort to becoming a part of a community, we'll see relationships begin to develop, and we see the Lord giving us grace in opportunities that become natural and normal part of a life routine for us as we initiate, as we take opportunity. You know, as a part of that environment of healthy activity, we need to be conscious of taking care of ourselves, and not in some sort of a non-Christian selfish way, but describing a helpful and healthy regular exercise routine, sleeping adequately well, eating adequately well, doing things that we enjoy as leisure activities, drawing on the resources God's given us in those ways to handle the stress that we're encountering adequately, spiritually staying focused and connected. Sometimes it helps us, and again, in appropriate measure, in appropriate measure because of the social media forms and other forms of communication available nowadays. But it does help us to keep in touch with friends and family at home and to let them know how we're doing. And even at times, another helpful activity can be keeping a journal. Keeping a journal that describes the process of what we're feeling, how our lives are changing, what we're learning in a positive way from our time in our new country. Not just a place to complain, but to describe the good work that God's doing in our lives. And that can become a resource that we can share with our family and friends too, as we let them know how to be a more appropriate help to us as we're in a second cultural setting, and to help them to empathize well with us in that situation. Another helpful activity that should be apparent but can affect us adversely when we're in a second language situation is that we have to initiate making friends. That we can identify sympathetic local people who are willing to help us out. And that can become a source of comfort for us, uncomfortable at first for almost all of us, but an initial means of developing the kinds of relationships that help us to not just to use people, but to really be able to engage with people so that we can put ourselves in a position to learn the basic things that we need to know, finding people that we want to get to know, we need to get to know in order to be able to acclimate ourselves well in that situation, and then beginning to share with them over time even the challenges and changes between our situation and theirs as we adjust to a new situation. And so what we're trying to do then is just describe for you some of the helpful activities and attitudes as well that help to create a context for us as we become equipped to engage effectively in a new setting and adjust culturally to that new context.